Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of Thursday, March 11th, 2021. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish First Nations. I'm in a reminiscent mood this morning, folks. Today is day 873 since we were elected, and the fun just keeps coming. When we were elected, we were already in a climate emergency and a public health emergency over the opioid epidemic. Then we had a lower road emergency. Then we had a COVID pandemic. And now we've got a housing emergency. So, like I say, the fun just keeps coming. This morning, we have an agenda in front of us. We have one change to the agenda, which is that item 7 is going to be moved to the in-camera agenda. Are there any other changes, additions, subtractions, multiplications? Seeing none, can I see a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Moved and seconded, all in favor? Wonderful, we're off to a great start. Could I also see a motion to receive all reports and communications? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Good, wonderful. And we're going to start this morning with a spring 2021 update on water. Over to staff, please.
Thank you very much, Chair McMahon. I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me a second. Of course, things don't go immediately as I want them to. Yes, there we go. So one of the key objectives of the strategic plan is to address the water supply situation on the coast. Over the last several years, significant investments have been made and are currently proposed in the draft 2021 budget to address this situation. Last year, several Let's Talk Water events presented the integrated approach to address the water supply crisis. This approach includes the development of new sources, water conservation, and operational improvements. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide the committee with a more detailed insight in the anticipated contributions of the several water supply projects that are currently in the several stages and the water metering program to addressing the water supply crisis. I'll now turn it over to Manager Ed Brook for the first part of the presentation, and I will take it over from her afterwards.
Great, thank you, Remco. You can go next slide. Today, we will present the SERD's approach to managing water, the objectives in the water sourcing policy framework, and how these influence water supply planning, the water metering program and different components, and Remco will outline 2 projections for future water demand and discuss the cost and value of different projects. The SERD is working to ensure a safe and sustainable water supply now and in the future for our growing communities. We are taking an integrated approach to water management, which includes increasing supply, promoting water conservation, and making operational improvements, as you can see in this diagram. And so I guess, what does this mean? We have a number of drivers: dry summers, increasing population, and at times summer water restrictions. And we realize we can't address our water supply issues with a single solution. An integrated approach considers new groundwater projects and exploring a raw water reservoir, along with a water metering program and conservation regulations, and increasing system efficiency. So we want to balance each piece of this pie chart. And today, this presentation will focus on water supply and the metering program as potential paths to eliminating the water supply deficit. So we just want to pause because there's some terminology in this presentation that some viewers of and potentially the board may not be familiar with. So we just want to take a moment to define these terms. We have the water demand analysis This is a planning tool, sometimes referred to as a model. This is used for forecasting water demand into the future and uses several factors like historical water use, population growth, climate change, and future infrastructure expansion. We have the water supply deficit. This is the volume of water needed to meet demand, and environmental flow needs. This comes up a lot, and this is defined in the Water Sustainability Act, and this is the volume and timing of water required for proper functioning of an aquatic ecosystem. So this is to protect our watersheds. So as the board knows, we are working under the guidance of the Water Sourcing Policy Framework. This was adopted in 2018 and has the objective of avoiding stage 3 and stage 4 restrictions. The other objective is having system redundancy for at least 1 week, and this is to ensure that we have adequate supply throughout the summer. So as Remco mentioned, addressing the water supply deficit is currently one of the top priorities for the SCRD. The water supply deficit projections can, we didn't skip a slide, did we? No. Okay, well, here's the water demand analysis. And as I mentioned, this is a forecast. So here we have the blue line is demand, and supply, as you can see, drops off in the summer. That's orange. And this is just one example from 2017. And again, this is the model that we use to project our needs for supply into the future. Here we go. This is the slide I was thinking of. So addressing the water supply deficit, as I mentioned, is a top priority, and these projections can vary over time, so into the future. So we've given for 2025, 2035, and 2050. And at baseline, you can see water supply deficit is most significant. And then there are also different projects that I mentioned earlier, like our groundwater sources and water metering. And these can each contribute in different ways to reducing the water supply deficit in the future. Mentioned the water metering program. It has several different components and is a really important program and initiative for water conservation. Over 6,200 metered properties in the SCRD. And of course, anyone who is metered can sign up for a monthly email. It's updated and has tailored information about their water use. We do outreach and engagement activities to raise awareness about this program, especially in the summer. And currently, users pay a flat bill, and water metering offers the opportunity to move to a pay-per-use rate structure. And of course, that would be subject to public consultation and board approval. And there's the leak program, which includes follow-up and support. And when a water meter indicates that there's a leak, we send out letters and notification. And of course, no one wants to waste water unknowingly, and we do see a lot of community support for this program. Since 2017, the SCRD has been fixing leaks on residential properties at a rate of 2 per day. And in 2020, there were 858 properties received one of those leak notification letters. And in January 2021, a property with a leak used about 4 times more than the average property. So you can get an idea of the scale. And fixing leaks early can protect a property and can potentially save homeowners money before the leak becomes more significant. So we know that residents already practice water conservation. Per capita demand in the SCRD is 10% below baseline through efficiencies we have achieved in the past 10 years, like the leak detection program that I mentioned, toilet replacements, and water conservation regulations. And the line on this graph represents the portion of the system's drinking water. And it tells us that a small number of metered properties that are each using more than 500 cubic meters per year, you can see on the far side, they're using about 1/3 of the total system's drinking water. So and then on the left side, we see that that's almost half of residents are using under 200 cubic meters. So overall, we can certainly see that there are some opportunities for reducing water, especially in that high use category. And we know that Water metering is used in many other jurisdictions. After water meters were installed and a new rate structure was implemented, the results of a Canadian study showed that households use 65% less water. The town of Gibson's reduced per capita demand by 40%, and that was just one of several measures that they put in place. And the district of West Vancouver saw a 30% drop in summer demand. So with our own policy objectives and all the data that we have available, this is all information that we use for the water demand analysis for this model. So for the following scenarios that we're going to present today, we assumed 2% annual population growth. We have per capita demand is 10% below baseline because that's what we're seeing on average right now throughout the year. We've aligned ourselves with the water sourcing policy framework to avoid going beyond stage 2. We see that demand is a bell curve. So in the summer, it peaks. That's when more people are outside watering their gardens. And we've assumed 6-month drought conditions. So we've seen fall droughts and spring droughts, and here we've assumed more extreme conditions in the future to be more conservative. And we've updated the environmental flow needs in Chapman Creek for that to be included within this model. And then we have 2 scenarios, one with water metering, one without. And for water metering that's fully implemented, we assume we're using a pay-per-use rate structure and that per capita demand is 30% below that 2010 baseline. And I'll just say briefly that these assumptions do impact the results. For example, if we used 3% population growth, even with a 30% reduction in per capita demand, we would need an extra 1.4 million cubic meters of water by 2050. And this is equal to an extra Edwards or Chapman Lake, which is pretty significant. So again, these are just 2 of many possible planning scenarios. And now I'm going to turn it over to Remco to discuss the results of the water demand analysis.
Thank you. I hope my mic is still on. Can you hear me or not?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if my mic was still on or not. Technical issues here. So there are 2 different scenarios that we have assessed out of the many that can be assessed. The one we are showing here is one where we consider status quo in terms of fully implemented water metering program. Staff calculated the amount of water required for the 6-month period between May 1st and October to stay at stage 2 watering restrictions. And the graph presented here is the status quo. So that is no implementation of pay-per-use rate structure, as well as no water metering installations in the seashell area. So so what you can see is that under this scenario, we would need Langdale and Grey Creek, the 2 projects on the books to further develop this year, to be both implemented in around about 2024, and then we would meet demand until about 2026, 2027. And by then, demand would already exceed our ability to provide stage 2 watering restrictions or not to exceed that. So new sources would be required in 2026 under this scenario. One of those new sources could, of course, be the Marianne West Park well that is scheduled to be monitored. However, it would still need to be confirmed if that's indeed a reasonable option to further develop. This is the scenario where we fully implement the water metering program. So with pay-per-use rate structure, as well as installation of the meters in the seashell area. Under this scenario, Langdale Wellfield is still scheduled to be implemented fully operational somewhere in 2024. However, the need to actually upgrade our treatment system at Grey Creek is deferred until 2032. So that's another 8 years that we don't have to do that. You can see that the demand drops significantly. That's the additional 20% that we're expected to achieve by the implementation of the metering program. And under this scenario, besides Grey Creek, no further supply sources would be required to meet the demand until 2039. So a significant, almost 2 decades ahead. So as a summary, the status quo scenario will, Grey Creek and Langdale will need to be online around 2024, as well as new source soon after 2026 to continue to meet the objectives of the water sourcing policy. And in 2035, we would already have a 0.6 million cubic meter deficit. And as a comparison, that's about 3/4 of the volume that we're currently drawing from Chapman Lake. With a fully implemented metering program, no new sources would be required besides Grey Creek and Langdale until 39. So significant period. But there is also, of course, a cost associated with development of any of these sources. Each of the sources has different volumes, and in a future slide, I will present the cost per cubic meter. But the costs we have included in the assessments are for Grey Creek. The very preliminary estimate is about 2.5 million. To develop a Langdale well field, preliminary estimate is about 5.2, and further work is required there to assess if additional infrastructure is required to optimize the distribution of that water from the well field through the entire system. Church Road well field will of course have a way more detailed cost estimate, including cost to date. The total cost would be about 9 million, and the phase 3 meter installations would come at the cost of 7.25 million. So if you then look at what would it cost on an average summer, so current average summer that has about 2 or 3 months of drought where we don't have significant rainfall, what would be the cost? So you can see here, this is the capital cost per cubic meter calculated for 2035 during an average summer. So Grey Creek, Langdale, and Church Road under that scenario would only maybe run 1, 2, maybe 3 months a year, while the universal metering program would have a benefit over 6 months period. The universal metering, as it's presented here, is on the conservative side in terms of estimates, and the Grey Creek, Langdale, and Church Road, if we would present this graph for worst case scenario where we would have a 6 month drought as the water sourcing policy objectives is, then of course the cost per cubic meter would be significantly reduced and would come very close to that of the metering program. There is of course also operational considerations. If we develop groundwater sources, there are different staffing requirements. There's definitely other maintenance requirements. There are different chemicals to be used at its own cost. In terms of electrical cost, we did a high-level comparison to use a Church Road well, for example, well field. The hydro cost would be about $1,000 a day, while currently our cost for Church Road, for a Chapman system, are about $315 a day. So there are significant additional electrical costs associated with the use of groundwater. Metering program, of course, there is staff, dedicated staff required to support the program. There's also maintenance and replacement costs associated with meters. and it will result in a reduction of our treatment and distribution cost. And it will result, as already indicated, in the deferral of capital investments, which will reduce the debt servicing costs for the community. So next steps. I think the 2021 budget has several items that will allow us to continue the development and implementation of the water supply projects. Metering program, AP is scheduled for late this spring, early this summer this year, and more information later on this committee meetings agenda. We will continue to implement the existing program components like the leak notifications and online data access for residents to access their water use data, and the implementation of the 2021 public participation plan that's also listed on this committee's agenda. That includes two Let's Talk Water events in April and May of this year. And we are more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Who has questions? Director Stigers, you were first on the mark.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. One of the pieces that I don't see information presented on is with regards to the Chapman Creek water treatment plant expansion. So I pulled up the comprehensive regional water plan. And if you look at the executive summary on page 3, I'll read you a paragraph. It says the Chapman Creek water treatment plant is presently operating close to its design capacity of 25 million liters per day. Under the existing demand management scenario, plant expansion is an immediate priority with stage 2 and 3 sprinkling restrictions to be implemented until expansion is completed. Under the intensive demand management scenario, universal metering and stage 2 and 3 sprinkling restrictions are anticipated to allow deferment of the timing for expansion until about the year 2020. We're now in 2021. So I don't see anything around the treatment plant and the cost for potential expansion that we could actually defer by reducing demand on the water, on our water supply. And so I guess I'm questioning, is this something that we need to consider or not? And if it is, why isn't it more prevalent in the information that we're putting out? Because that's a significant cost that I see we would potentially avoid by putting in the water meters. And it's not talked about, to the community. So over to staff.
Thank you for your question. You're correct in the sense that there's currently no requirement to update to expand our water treatment plant. I think we explained it before that our maximum usage currently during the summer is already, we're not exceeding the maximum capacity of the plant. It hasn't been for years. And I think the reduction in usage that we achieved since 2010 in combination with watering restrictions has to date resulted in that not being exceeded. With the development of additional sources like Church Road or potentially Langdale, that need would indeed be completely eliminated, that we would ever exceed the maximum capacity. So it's a fair point that you're making that by all the efforts, all the water supply expansion projects, as well as the metering program combined, those costs would not have to be made. And those would have been significant to expand the treatment plant. So it's a fair statement.
Okay, thank you. You need your sign, Donna.
Sorry. Over to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious about the redundancy of supply for at least 1 week under our water sourcing policy. the reason I'm asking the question is if we do have something that happens to the Chapman water system that we can't get fixed within a week, can the wells actually provide minimum water to the system? Can it be backfed and provide minimum water to the system so we have enough to drink and firefight? Is that part of the alternate use that we're developing, or alternate supplies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's indeed one of the benefits of developing the groundwater sources is that they could function as that redundancy, as the backup water supply if needed. And Church Road alone would not be able to provide the entire community with more or less a stage 4 level usage. However, if other supply sources would come online like Langdale, we would get there.
Thank you.
Over to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification question about the consumption table that was shown in the slide deck. Does that include or exclude commercial and farm users of water?
I can comment on that. The bar graph with the line is focused on the residential accounts, so it excludes the commercial accounts and many of the agricultural accounts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you. And I guess it would be a little bit hypothetical, but I guess the environmental flow needs weren't incorporated into any of these plans because we don't know if it's at all possible and what the reduction would actually be. Is that correct?
What we indicated is that we included a reduction to 180 for several months in the early summer. So we made an assumption about what we can achieve with an updated EFN.
Thank you. I have one. This is just a quibble, but I believe that at least some of the water main replacements associated with Church Road would have to be done anyway, even if we didn't drill the well. So it's not 100% fair to include them when you're comparing project to project. All right, Director Seegers.
Thank you. With regards to the environmental flow needs, have we ever looked at assisting the Chapman salmon enhancement people with providing wells so that they are actually independent of the Chapman Creek, at least somewhat, and that would reduce our environmental flow needs? Is that something we've ever looked at?
Them using, if the hatchery were to stop the diversion of water from the creek, it would not have, our EFN is senior over their water license. So them using well water would not have a benefit to our EFN because they can only use the amount of water that is flowing through the creek in excess of the EFN.
But doesn't the EFN require that we keep currently 200 whatever liters per second or whatever the number is to ensure that they have sufficient to be able to draw for the salmon in the creek?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can explain that. The 200 liters a second is 100% for the creek system itself, and is not does not take into account any water they divert. So it's only to protect the salmon ecosystem in the creek itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Couldn't resist the opportunity. The leak detection program. I'm looking at the phrase. It says the SERD supports fixing private leaks. And I think we might need a little bit of expectation management is I don't think the SCRD really fixes the leaks. Staff don't go on private property. I don't think they provide any support for fixing them. They are there to provide data. Is that the extent of the support that the SCRD provides, or is there tools that the SCRD is providing for people to how to find their own leaks? Like a frequently asked questions. This is the top 5 ways to find leaks. So I guess I'm wondering, how does SCRD support fixing private leaks is the question. The support piece particularly.
I can, thank you, Chair. The SRD does a variety of hand-holding steps to help people with identifying where a leak may be coming from and remedial action that can be taken. And that goes from everywhere to the notification when a continuous water flow is detected, to geophoning if the leak is suspected to be underground on the main with staff time and equipment, to some other tips and troubleshooting how to resolve leaks inside the house if that's where it's suspected to be. So there's a lot of communication and engagement that happens on the phone and on site from a variety of staff members throughout that process. And there is some literature that goes along with leak notification. And we're looking at additional communication tools such as video that's maybe a little bit more accessible.
So just to be clear, staff will not go on to private property. That is, we will do, SCRD staff will do everything except come on and kind of, they won't go on and look in your toilet and look for leaks, right? That is a dividing line. Don't go onto private property.
No, we won't. The SCRD will maintain public infrastructure. And on the outside, the water line underground between the meter and the property itself, that's something that we have tools that we can assist with helping pinpoint the leak. This is for the larger ones, especially. But no, the staff will not go inside a property.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask, these projections are, of course, moving targets. For instance, we're going to have census data coming that may change population projections and actual, we're making assumptions about water metering, about what sort of, I think, pretty conservative assumptions about what kind of savings we may get. We might do better than that. So will there be a regular update of all of these projections? Because any of these projects that we're going to undertake have a multi-year window. We have to make the go, not go decision several years before the actual need arrives. So what's going to be the plan going forward for this?
Thank you for the question. The first thing that we'll update later this year, and we hope to use the new census data with that, is update to the water supply deficit calculation itself. So our targets. Once we have those updated, then we can continue to refine our estimates, as well as our cost estimates, as well as our volume estimates, and see where we go. So yes, it will be an ongoing effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, on that note, I think those projections and graphs were all pretty bang on the money, right? Right there. And then I feel like there should be a little bit of a contingency that should be put into the whole thing so that we can be confident that even as projections sway by 2, 3, 5 percentage points, that we still have enough water. That being said, I think that as the GM Rosenboom said, that things are still being refined. So I think it gives us an idea, but I do think that we should put in a contingency.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? I'm not seeing any excitement out there. Thank you very much. That was a good and interesting report. So next, the 2021 Water Public Participation Plan.
Great. I'll try to be brief. Thank you to the chair and the committee for the opportunity to present the Water Public Participation Plan for this year. The plan aims to inform the public about our water supply and conservation initiatives, including communications about summer water use and implementation of the drought response plan. So this is phase 1 in the attachment. And even in the past few months, as we just discussed, there's been a shift in our approach to addressing the water supply deficit. We do receive many questions about the water metering program from the public, from associations, businesses, and even our Water Supply Advisory Committee, WASAC. And we are committed to making information more available through our website, forums, and posting videos. We're putting together some more materials right now. And I'll note that in this phase, in the first phase, we're not seeking public input on our existing programs. These are programs and projects that are already underway. And rather, we really want to provide a better understanding about the problem and the opportunities within our water system. So at the same time, we're preparing for phase 2 in the fall. We'll be seeking input on a number of new initiatives that are related to long-term planning. I think this was, again, brought up in the last presentation that there are elements of our comprehensive regional water plan that are outdated, and that was adopted and, well, I guess compiled and adopted in 2013. It needs to be updated, and as well as to our water bylaw. So I'll mention briefly that discussion papers are designed to clearly present the background information, the problem, and put into writing our policy proposals. And these can serve as the basis for public input, especially on technical bylaw language, for example. So the idea is that we put our intentions in writing and we can present them. This plan isn't a substitute for engagement strategies. Each of these will seek to involve the relevant stakeholders. And finally, I'll just mention that we incorporated the thoughtful comments from WASAC. They submitted a feedback form to us before their March meeting, and some of their ideas on broader engagement weren't incorporated into the attachment, but we'll certainly consider them as we implement this plan. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in with one. We had really hoped that Church Road Well was going to be online this year. So we're facing another challenging summer, potentially. Is there a snowpack update coming sometime soon?
Again, I'm going to do a more extended one at the next month's IC meeting, but I can. At this point in time, what we see is that there hasn't been a lot of snow falling recently, and it's really dry at the moment. So, however, the snow that has fallen to date is about average. So I'm really curious to see what the upcoming weeks will do. We'll go up there again in 2 weeks from now, and usually that is a good indicator. The one at the end of March. What the snowpack is that we will have moving into the spring so we'll see. At this point, it looks good. Let's see what it does in 2 weeks, because usually in March there is some snowfall happening, and this year there's not a lot of. So we'll see.
Thank you very much, Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 5 in our package, and this is attachment A, sorry. Phase 1 talks about the universal water metering program, etc. And I know in our board package this afternoon, we have the loan authorization bylaw coming forward for presentation to the board. So am I to assume that these activities, the scope that's indicated in here, and the Let's Talk Water events around water metering are all in support of that AAP, or are these separate from that process? Because I don't see in here the actual activity of, the AAP process in the community.
Sherry, do you want to respond to this? I would say at this point they're separate, and Sherry may have more to share about the AAP process. But you're on mute.
Part of the AAP process will be ensuring that the information is out in the public so that they can make an informed decision. And I would say that these activities are, in that sense, in support of that, in providing that public information.
Okay, so follow up. So am I to understand that they are two separate processes? And that there will be separate communication supporting the AAP as separate from these activities?
So there will be communication on the actual AAP process, which will be separate from this. This engagement plan is just generally around water engagement. And once we embark on the AAP, we will be providing information specific to that process, the actual AAP, as well as the water metering program. That answer the question?
Yes and no. Okay, personally, I'd like to see them working together.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they have to support each other.
Yes, they do.
I know when we were doing our AAP in Seashell, we had our communications department working side by side with corporate because the information has to mesh. It has to be, we have to ensure that the information's out there. So questions would come in under the AAP.
Yes.
Communications would jump on those and address those and put them on the FAQ page, for example, right? So I just want to ensure that it's not seen as two separate processes, but that we're working together as a team.
Yes, correct. Remco.
Thank you. Maybe I can clarify. This plan has been drafted in collaboration, in good collaboration between the Strategic Initiative Department as well as the communication group. And that's how it should be, and that's how it will be. What I think our corporate office is talking about is actually the process itself with respect to AAP, dates, forms, how to fill it out, etc., etc. That will be a separate communication stream. But any communication around the content of the why and the benefits, etc., that will be merged, and that will fall under the umbrella of this plan, because we recognize that metering is not a standalone component. It is part of the integrated approach. So we need to integrate it in that broader approach and share that with the public, like we did this morning in the presentation. And we will continue to expand on that. That there is communication beside it about dates, where to find forms, etc., that is a separate communication stream that will come primarily out of the corporate officer and the communication group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Director Ties.
Yeah, I see in this report that WASAC is not mentioned as a referral and then recommendations and as a stakeholder. So I'm wondering, is that because they were already consulted on this, or is it just an oversight? Thanks.
The plan is to bring all projects to WASAC. So I guess that would be an oversight. Yeah, that they're not mentioned in the list of stakeholders.
I think I would answer the question a little bit different. I don't see WASAC as a stakeholder. I see WASAC as an integrated part of our process to just keep us informed. So I don't see them as an external stakeholder. That's why I think, yeah, they'll be consulted.
I'll also add, we talked a bit about how we have a work plan for our division, but this is our public participation work plan for the year. And that's a big part of the WASAC terms of reference. And we hope to seek their input on a lot of the materials that we're going forward with.
Thank you. Over to Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. I'd just like to put a plug in there for directors and where we can be involved in this process, especially with the public participation piece. And you know, because I'm anticipating a great deal of community ire as we head into a summer of potential water restrictions without Church Road being online, and then also around the AAP process for meters. So there's going to be a lot of pressure put on staff, and I think it's probably important to have the elected out in front of that too. So I'm certainly willing. I'm not sure about other directors, but I mean, we're used to being out in the public eye and coming off the budget information sessions. I'm just going to put it out there as I know I'd be happy to be a part of any public participation.
Thanks for volunteering us, Director Pratt. Anything further? Okay, over to Director Seegers.
What Director Pratt said is part of what I wanted to indicate. You know, as we know, we had, the last time the AAP came out, we had some people in our community who actively campaigned against it and, you know, use us for you know, that interface that needs to happen. But I'd also suggest that for our manager of communications, that he actively engage our communications manager at the District of Sechelt and the communications manager at the SIGD, because the information flow will be really important. It's a short period of time that we're dealing with this, and it's going to be a lot. I mean, you know, SERD will be dealing with everybody on the Sunshine Coast who will be bringing things in, but we'll be getting a lot of volume at the District of Sechelt. So, you know, team approach, and I know, you know, Mr. Buckley's probably on top of that.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, good to see all this stuff coming forth. On page 3, it mentioned the water summit. So I was just wondering where that stands in terms of the public participation. Our schedule has been disrupted over the last year, so it's is that still? I'm not sure where that project is, because it was to be, I can't remember when that was, sometime before now, in the past we were supposed to do that.
So my understanding is that it was, when the idea was conceived, it was supposed to be an in-person gathering, or a chance for the community to get together. We're not exactly sure what the future holds, but my understanding from what I'm reading on the news is likely probably not for this year, but something we can do in the future for an in-person event. So instead, I think it would be really great, almost in the way that we just did the spring update, I think, to be able to do a one-day summary event, maybe at the end of this year, to update again the public and all of our stakeholders on where we're at, update those projections with more information, and bring in some speakers. And WASAC actually gave us some really great ideas on topics that people would be interested in. And I think we'll start through our web pages, try to survey the public as well about what topics they would want to hear more about. So we're aiming to do that by the end of this year. And what that means in terms of engagement, I think that we still have to ask ourselves what questions we want to ask. And that hasn't been developed yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to mention that in this story, there is actually a good news story, because as Director Seegers pointed out, we don't have to expand the water treatment plant. And the reason for that is that usage has dropped. People are conserving more water. And then the leak program has also helped us out. So this is, at least in the rural areas, I think is a nice opportunity to thank the public for all they've done to help us with this difficult problem. So I don't see anybody else lining up to speak, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is metering installation phase 3 project financial update. And that looks like it's our manager.
Thank you very much, Chair McMahon. At this afternoon's board meeting, the loan authorization bylaw for the water meter installation phase 3 project will be considered. The purpose of this report is to provide some additional financial information on the project and the proposed loan. And staff would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Don't all jump up at once. Director Ties.
Yeah, so on page 8, second paragraph under financial implications. I'm just wondering if there's a contingency for maintenance and an expected failure rate before scheduled replacements. So if something happens before we expect it to happen.
Thank you for the question. Under a loan like this, we cannot borrow money for operating and maintenance. It can only be for capital investment. So this would really be for the capital side of the house. The operating side of the house should be dealt with differently, and that's what we're currently already have in our budget as well. When something fails, and I agree, not all meters survive 20 years.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm interested in kind of the last AAP was the borrowing was $6 million, and now we're going to 7.2. So looking at the table on page 7, it looks like the I'm just wondering which portions went to the extra $1.25 million. You know, escalation of cost, timing, and I see the contingency as kind of a significant step that whether that was there in the past. So just 6 million to 7.25 seems reasonable. I'm just going, was there anything particular that caused the escalation over the 3 years, I guess?
Thank you for the question. I think it is a combination of things you indicated. It is of course regular inflation and cost increases. What we used here is we went back to suppliers and received updated information on what they projected the cost would be if we were to proceed at the end of the year. And we also included or considered more current practices around archaeology that that have increased the cost for that line item compared to what was proposed in 2017, 2018. It's correct as well that the contingency allowance is included now and wasn't prior.
Thank you very much. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. The previous AAP, if I recall correctly, indicated that the costs could be incorporated within existing parcel taxes. I'm wondering at this point if that was actually a fully accurate suggestion, or if the sustainability of rates have changed enough in such a way that there's just zero possibility of that moving forward. Thank you.
Shall I go ahead, Chair?
Sure, go for it.
Thank you. So this particular AAP or debt servicing has not been integrated into the parcel tax rates that have been approved for 2021. Most certainly there is financial information provided here as to what the potential implication will be. And that would be, as far as the implementation of it, it would be dependent on the results of the AAP. But these most certainly fit within the existing bylaw and parcel tax, our ability to recover. It's not so prescribed like community recreation is prescribed. It's only for debt servicing for a specific purpose. When that purpose ends, and we'd have to modify the bylaw, not in this particular case. So we do have the legislative framework to proceed with this, as well as something like Church Road.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question. I know we've seen this information before, but I can't remember at the moment. Is how many or kind of what percentage of the households in Sechelt do not have water meters? Because all the new ones have been installed with water meters now for some years.
The numbers, I have to pull it up here. I think it's about 4,800 water meters that are still to be installed and about 1,100 that would need to be replaced because they are not compatible anymore.
Right. Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Sorry, just a clarification on page 8, the table that was referred to with the rates and the estimated parcel tax rate. Is that, am I to assume that's an increase to the parcel tax rate of that amount? It doesn't indicate that in here.
Yes.
Okay. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, I see the cost of the project in this report, but I think there's a cost avoidance component. In other words, we're investing this much money, but by doing that, we are actually avoiding this much in future costs. Is that somewhere in the presentation, or do you think it's appropriate to put it in a report like this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. What we try to do in this report is provide the factual information on the loan authorization itself. The cost avoidance part, the funds that we don't have to spend, is indeed part of the presentation, the first agenda item of today's meeting. And based on the suggestions by the board today, or the remarks by the board today around other projects that were deferred or don't have to be completed, we'll work on how to better explain that side of the house. What are we not? What don't we have to do, or what can we defer? And so we'll take that as a takeaway from today's meeting. Thank you.
And put an actual dollar on it, as opposed to the fact that it just doesn't have to be done. I know it's an estimate, but it's actually a good news story when you look at it from that point of view.
Okay, our CFO wants to weigh in here.
Yeah, just very briefly, with the comprehensive regional water plan, we had everything priced out, and of course we are no longer using that model because of course there's been some significant changes to it. So if we're working towards building a model like that, that would then show things like cost avoidance and impacts of deferring projects or implementing new projects, like was presented at earlier's discussion.
Always good to talk about how we're saving money. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Digging into the costs here a bit. So the AAP in 2018 was the 20-year amortization, and we're going with a 15-year amortization to match up with life cycle costing. I don't, where does the replacement of the meters fit in terms of a meter's going to wear out in 15 years? I can't remember where that funding pot comes from. I guess that's in the asset management of the meters. I don't know where that is.
If I could, Chair. So again, yes, that would be in the full costing analysis for the service. So that would be new infrastructure that we would have to get a replacement and a program. And some of those may be operational. They may be a capital renewal plan. So that, no, is not currently part of the estimate here. This is only estimating the debt servicing cost. It's not part of implementing the full program, which would include not just the asset renewal, but the maintenance, the implementation, reading the meters, et cetera. But I think part of those have come forward to you as separate budget proposals, whether it's part of the water analytics or new staffing to do those types of things. So I don't know if GM has any comments.
The only comment I can make here is that current project will include the meters, but also adjacent infrastructure like the boxes and the insulation component itself. The installation of meter itself is a way a cheaper exercise than full installation of meters as is within scope of this project. Thank you.
So in other words, replacement costs would be much lower than the original installation costs.
Correct. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Once again, we don't have to make a decision. I love mornings like this. So next up on our agenda is groundwater investigation phase 2 contract amendment.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Presented for your consideration is a contract amendment with Calway Water Dynamics for the completion of the feasibility study of the Langdale well site. Work will consist of long-term water quality monitoring and Langdale Creek flow monitoring that could not be completed within the first part of this project. This work is recommended to proceed now under the budget carried forward from 2020 in order to speed up the overall project timeline. Please accept our apologies for the duplicate short paragraph on page 1 of this report. Staff will be more than happy to discuss any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe on page 10, we decided that the first of the almost duplicate paragraphs is the correct paragraph, just in case anybody wanted to know. Director Ties.
Yeah, question. It doesn't look like there's a funding source identified in the recommendations. So which funding source would it be?
Thank you for the question. I can answer that one. It's still to be, we have remaining budget within our groundwater investigation round 2 budget. So there is no additional budget required to fund this. It can be funded out of existing budget. So hence there is no, it's not identified.
Great, thank you. Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations as on page 10.
And I see a seconder. That's great. I just had one quick question. Where does Langdale Creek get monitored? Is it monitored down by the ferry parking lot or further up?
Thank you for the question. Our consultant has identified a couple of potential locations. That'll be confirmed with some further field investigation. But I believe the location that she identified is where the Marine Ave crosses over Langdale Creek as being the most likely.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any more hands up, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you very much. Wow, we are whizzing through our agenda this morning. All right. Item number 6 is the South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot Land Use Agreement. Over to Mr. Rosenboom, I believe.
Yes, thank you for the question. For the opportunity to introduce this report. Last year, the board directed staff to engage with the town of Gibson on an agreement that would allow an SRD contractor to take over the operations of the South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the execution of that agreement. Unfortunately, the conclusion section states that the town of Gibson has already confirmed their ability to continue to operate the site until the end of the 2021 to allow for the transition and the procurement and the transition of an SRD contractor. As stated elsewhere in the report and as included in the recommendations is that staff only requested at the town of Gibson but haven't received some confirmation on that yet. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to call Director Beamish first since it's town of Gibson's.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did talk to the CAO about this, and for operational reasons, we're certainly prepared to work on a 6-month basis with it, but that 6 months should start from approval of this tendering process, which should be, I would think, if this was approved now, we should be able to take 6 months to the end of September as opposed to the end of December. We have challenges with staffing. Right now, we have 2 of our public works guys off on injury. So it makes it difficult to maintain this on a longer term basis. Certainly, his view was the end of September. If there was the need to go beyond the end of September, further negotiation or discussion would be held on that basis, as if we have to hire somebody to work with our staff for that. But right now we have agreed, as you see, that to go month to month to the end of July, and that's fine. Or the end of June, I guess, and that's fine. But 3 months beyond that, we're certainly prepared to work with. 6 months makes it challenging, but because you referenced in the report a 6-month tendering process, if this was approved now and the tendering was started, that 6-month process would end at the end of September in any event. So, but if that can be looked at, I'm certainly comfortable pushing this forward to our council.
Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
I was going to move the recommendations, but I probably want to hear from staff on that before I see what I want to say.
I think based on the remarks from Director Beamish, which I very much appreciate, I think the last recommendation can be amended and that further that the town of Gibson's continue to operate the South Coast waste drop-off depot on a month-to-month basis from July 2021 up to September 31st, 2021.
Okay,
Probably
so
September 30th.
September 30th, yes.
September 30th, sorry.
Does it need to actually have the July 1st in there? Or is that because our current agreement ends June 30th?
Correct.
Okay. So I'll move the recommendations as amended. So with the last one reading from July 1st, 2021 for a period up to the end of September, or up to September 30th, 2021.
And do we have a seconder? Good, that's seconded. Thank you. Director Hiltz, are you talking to the motion?
It was a question on the contract.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I guess I'm thinking service levels, and this facility is 7 days a week. Is that the continuing service level? I'm just wondering, is there ability, like the town of Gibson's might be short staffed, is there ability for them to change the opening hours in some ways? Like I don't know if we have another solid waste service that's open 7 days a week. I think that's still its hours. So is there ability for them to change that pending staffing issues?
Over to staff.
I think that's a discussion that we're open to have. But if we were to do so, I think it would be I would report if that would be desired. I think I would need to report back to the board and seek your approval for that. But more than happy to have those discussions with Town of Gibson staff if required.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, I just not sure if I heard right on the amendment, but I thought I heard September as the end date. It presently reads December.
Right.
Is September the correct end date?
Hi, it's Trish Ray. And
yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
No. All right. Director Seegers.
Further to the conversation brought up by Director Hiltz, does that need to be addressed in some kind of recommendation to staff? And that could be a separate one, but does that impact this one that we're looking at on the floor? Or we look at potentially changing the hours of operation or the days of operation?
I thought that would come back to us if needed. I don't think we have to change it at this time.
Okay.
So my question is, how does this fit in with the timeline for the audit of the use of the green waste facility? Is that Ms. Cooper?
Yeah, well, Manager Cooper just joined us, so can you take this question?
Sure. Sure. Thanks for the question. The continuity of having the service in place until September 30th, or should there be a transition, whether it's before or after, won't affect the ability to conduct the audit. Thanks.
Okay. And when do we get the results of the audit?
Well, first we have to wait for budget adoption, and then I'll review the work plan of our staff and what was in the proposal. And so depending on what was in the proposal, probably Q3 this year. Thanks.
And yes, because obviously the heavy season at the green waste drop-off is coming up real soon now, probably April, May, June, something like that. Director Beamish.
I think one of the biggest challenges with the green waste, well, volume being one, but the handling of noxious weeds. And I'm hoping that somehow a future contract can look at this. Right now, I think it's pretty much all in the honor system. You don't put it in there, but there is no alternative. And we need to come up with an alternative for handling of the noxious weeds that are prevalent on the coast in some areas. And that would certainly be good to see if we had that more education around that.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't see anyone else on the speakers list, so I'm going to call the question on the motion on the floor, the amended motion on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And the next item, item 7, it has been moved to the in-camera agenda for later this morning. Next item up then is our PMAC minutes from February 16th. And there are a number of recommendations in there that we need to take a look at. There is recommendation 2, for starters, on page 22. PMAC has recommended that the SCRD make the issuance of building permits conditional on the applicant adopting the principles of zero waste. And since I was at that meeting and heard the presentation by the unbuilders, I know what they were getting at here. The unbuilders have come up with a pretty simple system for reducing waste on job sites, which is that they provide a bunch of bins that allow workers to separate the waste right on the site, so that then you don't have everything going into one waste stream, that it can be diverted. But I'm thinking that the motion is a little broad and would not necessarily apply to every building permit, like the folks doing the deck across the street from me this morning. So my suggestion would be that we refer this back to staff for further recommendations on how we can do this. Director Seegers.
I was thinking along the same lines, that, and so I'd make a motion that recommendation 2 from the PMAC committee be referred to staff for further information and potential consultation with the construction industry.
Thank you. Do I see a seconder? Yes, that is seconded. Terrific. Not seeing anyone else there. All right, I'm calling the question. All in favor? Excellent, that passes. So recommendation number 3 was that we invite sea to sky removal as a delegation to ISC. I've seen their presentation. It's really good. So if folks are interested, we could, Director Toth.
Who or what are they?
They do unbuilding, and also they do separation on construction sites of construction waste, and that of course is a huge problem for us. We get a lot of construction waste at the landfill. Director Seegers?
What is unbuilding? Is that like taking a building apart piece by piece? So
yes.
recycling a building. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I've never heard it called unbuilding. Okay.
Well, demolition is traditionally driving a bulldozer over it and then scraping up the mess that you've left behind. So, so does anybody want to move recommendation number 3? Director Toth?
Yeah, happy to move that recommendation that they come to be a delegation at a future ISC meeting. Thank you.
Great. And I saw a seconder. All in favor? Terrific. That passes. And then recommendation number 8 is, and I will also put some context to that. The PMAC was concerned that a lot of people on the coast are not aware of how close the landfill is to being full. And they were looking at ways to communicate the urgency of the situation, as well as to provide information on remaining landfill capacity and diversion. I think perhaps the best way to deal with this also is to refer to staff, but Director Ties.
I think it'd be great to have something like a debt clock up there for both the landfill capacity total and and the annual one. But of course, I think that's like shooting sparrows with a cannon, but it'd be kind of cool.
Director Pratt.
So was the suggestion like similar to fundraising thermometer type of thing?
Right, or the doomsday clock, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Okay, that's it's I think it's an interesting idea, but I would refer it to staff. I see we're getting Zoom bombed too for IT.
Oh, excellent. Okay, Director Lee.
Yes, I agree, refer to staff, but also include the Pender transfer station.
Okay, good idea. So, do we have a motion to refer to staff? Moved, seconded, awesome, all in favor? Yay, we're done. This seems like a really good point to take a break. And we have to go into the, there was nothing from WASAC minutes, was there? Did anybody have anything arising from WASAC minutes? Not seeing anything? Okay, the next thing up is that I'd like to see a motion to go in camera, that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 91K of the community charter. Moved and seconded. And I was just going to check to make sure that we're fully covered on that. I think we are. So all in favor? And do we have any questions from legitimate people in the gallery? Connie, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. I was wondering if you could provide any further detail on why item 7 was moved to in camera.
because it requires further discussion of the details of the contract. If somebody wants to say that better than me, you're welcome to go out, but yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, it is now 10:50. Let's take a 10-minute break and resume at 11 o'clock. Thank you. We are resuming at long last the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of Thursday, March 11th, 2021. We have, where are we, folks? We have no further items on the agenda, I do not think, at this point, or do we? Director Hills.
I think Jim Rosenboom is mentioning recommendation 8 on Wasatch. I think that was a reminder.
Oh,
bring
right.
That
Thank you so much. That's right. Recommendation 8 from Wasatch on page 26 of our agenda was that the monthly, the meeting schedule be changed. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Director Seegers, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. Have we finally exhausted our business and ourselves? Oh, I would really love a motion to adjourn. Moo, seconded. All in favor? Yay. Thank you, everyone.